Okay, so we looked at the simple way of debugging server-side code. The better way to debug server-side code is to actually set up a web server yourself. So rather than having, when you're trying to test out your code and just uploading everything to SiteGround that has the web server set up for you, you can run your own web server in an IDE like this in Eclipse, and then you do have control. You are running your code on the server and you can debug your code right there. So what I'm showing you here, this is actually a YouTube video. We're looking at just a paused YouTube video where somebody has Eclipse set up. And I'm showing you this YouTube video because they've already got everything set up and I don't have things set up on my computer I'm recording this on, because it takes a little bit of effort to set this up. But you can actually use an IDE like all of you have used before, like JGrasp or something like that, and you can actually set up a web server inside of that IDE. And rather than hosting your code on SiteGround, okay, which you might do once your code is actually done, you can actually develop it in an IDE that's running a web server. And so let's just look at this example. So they've got a file called results.php. You can see that right here. They've got another file called entergreeting.php, and basically they're going to enter in some information and it's going to send that information to results.php, and it's supposed to print this out here. So if something was going wrong with this, and don't worry, we don't need to understand what all this does, but if something was going wrong, if they were, again, running their enter greeting and they entered something in and then it was supposed to send information to this PHP script and it wasn't working, you can actually be running this right here in your own web server that's running on your own machine, and then you can actually debug through, you can actually step by step debug through the actual PHP that's running. So I'm going to actually click play here and show you. Let's see. So here's the enter greeting file. So this is what the actual form is that we're going to be entering in some information. And again, don't worry about all the details here. They have some extra things in here, but we're just going to see how this form is supposed to send information to the results.php, and it's not going to work. And we can watch the debugging happen. So here's where they're actually going to debug the actual page, and you'll see what happens. I'll pause this here. Since we're running this all in this nice IDE called Eclipse, okay, it's got all this built-in functionality. So it's got this web server that's actually running, trying to run the PHP. And also you can see it has its own little internal web browser. So it's got the client and the server kind of built into this one application. And you can see that the actual web page is appearing here. So the enter greeting page that says, you know, hello, and then world in this case, and shows the form is running right down here. And so you can actually run this application right here in this actual internal web browser. So we'll click play. So they're actually just running the web page. They're typing in test, clicking submit, and now it's asking them if they want to debug. And you can see that it just changed over to this debug mode. And now notice in results.php, so this is the PHP file that's now supposed to be getting that name that they just typed in. It's supposed to be getting the name test. Okay, it is running that code right here, and it's actually debugging. So they had set a breakpoint right here, and it's stopped at this line. So keep in mind, this is the PHP code that's running on the server. So in our world, this would be running on SiteGround site, or on SiteGround server, something we don't have control over. But since they're running the web server here in their own computer, okay, they can stop and debug. And so we'll just watch a little bit here how they actually walk through this now. So there's their browser. They typed in test, and they're going to see what information is actually coming through here. You can look at all your variables up there. So here's where they're looking to see that they're actually getting the name test. Right? That's what was actually typed in, and so that's what they should get here when they say post name. So we'll watch a little farther here. And they're going to step now and continue through. And I think really that's all I'm going to show you for today. So you can use your debugging tools, you can use your step-by-step debugging tools and walk through one by one and actually see these lines execute. So rather than putting print statements throughout this code, which is a fine way to do it, okay, when you actually set up your own server, like they've done here in Eclipse, and like I did when I was a professional web developer, okay, then you have control over the server and you can actually watch the lines execute and debug with a full debugger. software that has all the capabilities to inspect breakpoints and things like that. So I wanted to show you that. I don't think most of you would have time to set this up for your project for this week, but I want you to be aware of this, that if you go off into the world and become a web developer, this is going to be the type of setup that you're going to want to have for debugging server-side code.